President Trump back at the White House tonight after a President's Day weekend at Mar-a-Lago and the surprise announcement of the newest member of his team. This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. The president says this about his new national security advisor, Lieutenant General H.R. Mcmaster.
He is highly respected by everybody in the military, and we're very honored to have him.
Meanwhile, protesters take to the streets today in cities across the country for what they're calling Not My President's Day rallies. Plus, free speech or hate speech. The Breitbart editor, who's infuriated critics on the left and the right. You saw him with Bill Maher this weekend. But what got him booted from a major conservative conference this week is much, much worse. We'll talk about all of that this evening. Let's get right, though, to the White House correspondent, Sarah Murray. Sarah, good evening to you. Thanks for joining us tonight. The president announced Lieutenant General H.R. Mcmaster as his national security advisor after firing General Michael Flynn over trust issues. Here's what the president said today.
We've been working all weekend, very diligently, very hard, that General H.R. Mcmaster will become the national security advisor. He's a man of tremendous talent and tremendous experience. I watched and read a lot over the last 2 days. He is highly respected by everybody in the military, and we're very honored to have him.
So, Sarah, as we know, he wasn't the president's first choice. So how did the president decide on Lieutenant General McMaster?
Well, he wasn't the president's first choice necessarily to fill the job, but the White House knew they had to move quickly to fill this position. This is the top national security advisor. When Michael Flynn held this role, this was someone the president turned to for guidance and for information every single day. So he spent the weekend poring over these potential picks and eventually decided on Lieutenant General McMaster. And a senior administration official told me that it was really a combination of McMaster's combat experience as well as his intellectual drive that really sold Trump on the pick, and that's where we are today, Don.
And Sarah, you have new reporting tonight on Ohio Governor John Kasich, slated to meet with President Trump later this week. What do you know?
Well, we have heard from sources on both sides of this that there is a tentative meeting set up here at the White House between President Trump and the Ohio governor. Now, remember, the governor was a fierce critic of Trump throughout the presidential campaign. He wouldn't even show his face at the GOP convention, which was held in Cleveland. He's, of course, a sitting governor of Ohio, so that was a pretty big snub. And on top of that, he wrote in John McCain's name on his ballot when it came time to vote. So he didn't even vote for Donald Trump. But a senior administration official tells me that this meeting is long overdue. Again, tentatively scheduled for Friday. We've seen these meetings collapse in the past when it comes to this administration, so we'll see if this one holds. So
stay tuned is what you're saying. Sarah, also the president is also expected to sign a new travel ban this week. What can you tell us about the president's agenda?
Well, this seems like the big agenda item for them this week. Of course, their existing travel ban is caught up in the courts. They're trying to tailor one that will uphold that kind of scrutiny, and they're looking at why the previous ban was knocked down or held up. And I'm told from a senior administration official that the new ban is likely to still apply to these same 7 Muslim-majority countries. This person would not say whether the Syrian refugee ban, which was indefinite in the first proposal, will still hold through this executive order. But they do want to make some changes so that they hope that it'll uphold the scrutiny of the courts. One of those is to make it clear in this new executive order that green card holders will not be subject to this ban. And the other is to offer clearer guidance to people who have current or pending visas. Remember, Don, that was another thing that took people by surprise and left some folks caught up in airports or preparing to head to the airport only to find out that they were no longer going to be allowed in the country. We are expecting that late this week, but as always, Don, with this White House, timelines can be fluid.
So it seems like not much going on this week. With sarcasm.
Yeah, it's going to be super easy.
It's going to be super easy. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. Let's bring in now CNN senior political reporter Nia Malika Henderson, senior political analyst Mr. David Gergen, national security analyst Ms. Juliette Kayyem, the author of Security Mom, a great book, by the way, and military analyst Major General James Spider Marks. Good evening to all of you. Thank you for joining us. Happy President's Day, by the way. Let's start with you, General Marks. What can you tell us about Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster?
Don, that's a wonderful choice. H.R. McMaster has a tremendous reputation in the military, and he's a very, very highly regarded PhD. So he's both a soldier and he's a scholar. He's got incredible combat qualifications from time in Iraq and elsewhere in the Mideast. What's good about HR is that he's an iconoclast. He came up, as he was progressing through the ranks in the military after his graduation from West Point, he was identified early on during Desert Storm. He won the Silver Star and he was identified as one of those leaders that would really take us through the next generation. But sadly, what happened, for whatever reason, he was kind of pushed aside. I think it was because he was speaking out about the type of leadership that's necessary to move this military forward. He's the author of a book that is incredibly damning about the Department of Defense during the Vietnam War called Dereliction of Duty. And I think many embraced that and looked at HR and said, I don't know that we need this type of criticism this vocally in the military. And it took a couple of selections for general officer to finally get him over the threshold and get him into the ranks of the general officer, which was long overdue. Now he's accelerated through and he's doing incredible things for the military. He is a strategist of the first order, which is what you really want in that position.
How's that defiance going to play out in the White House, though? In a Trump White House, especially?
Well, I got to tell you, the primary issue is going to be how is he going to comport, how is he going to work with the rest of that national security staff, to include Mr. Bannon. Having a policy guy in the National Security Council would not have been my recommendation, but I got it. That's a done deal. In military terms, that's a decision. It's been made. Put it to the side. That should not be, and it will not be, HR's first battle to take on. That would be a death knell to him immediately. So he'll walk into that position. His first job is going to have to be able to establish what are the top 3 to 4 priorities in terms of our foreign policy, our international engagement. That's what he needs to do first and foremost, and he'll do that certainly with Jim Mattis in the Defense Department, John Kelly over in DHS, certainly with Rex Tillerson in State. That makes up the key bodies within the National Security Council.
Okay.
That needs to be going forward. In fact, I would suggest the president needs to have a speech right now that says this is what our priorities are for our foreign policy moving forward.
Well, let's talk more about how this affects the National Security Council. Juliet, what does this mean for the National Security Council, considering you still have a political operative like Steve Bannon, which the general referred to, with a seat at the table?
Well, from folks I've talked to today, there's a sense of relief. I think that you have an adult, someone as qualified as Spider was saying, regarding not just policy, but also operations, someone who's been out in the field. From the agency perspective, because remember, the role of the National Security Advisor is also to guide DOD, the State Department, hear from them, DHS, what do they want, CIA, is to open the lens wide enough so that the president himself gets the best advice. Where I'm less optimistic is I'm not sure whether Bannon has a seat at the table or whether he's running a parallel National Security Council that is sort of not transparent to the national security staff. If that's the case, then we're going to see conflict continuing in the future. But finally, the most important thing, as Spider was saying, is it's a month. It's time to be president in the sense of you have to get some policies going. There's massive confusion out there. I just made a quick list. Do we take the oil or not take the oil? Conflicting statements from the administration. Israel, 1 state or 2 state. China, do we recognize Taiwan or not? NATO, are we for it or against it? Torture, are we for it or against it? You have so many different pieces running around going now that my hope is that now the new National Security Advisor can begin to have a consistent and coherent national security policy. We may agree or disagree with it, but at least we'll have something to debate. Now it's just a lot of confusion.
There should be on the same page. I saw you shaking your head there a lot, David Gergen, especially when she talked about parallel national security advisors, or national security at least.
Well, Don, overall, this is a superb choice, one that any president would be proud of. General Mcmaster is not only known for his iconoclasm, as Spider talked about, he is an iconoclast, but very importantly, he's a strategist. And this administration needs a strategist on international policy. There's great confusion in the world about what our priorities are, what we're trying to achieve over the long haul. Are we trying to play with Russia and China? Are we trying to play with Russia against China? Where are we trying to go go in the EU. You can talk about all sorts of issues, but to go about Juliet's issue, I also think there's still an unresolved question about whether these other power centers in the White House are going to be challenging him. Are we going to have a shadow national security unit under Bennett? Is indeed Jared Kushner going to be a shadow Secretary of State? He seems to be out there on his own, talking to his father-in-law, bypassing the Secretary of State. What's going to be really important for General McMaster is to bring coherence and bring authority and bring a hierarchy to this process, so you don't have these competing power centers. And the one thing he does not have is a lot of experience in Washington and in the Pentagon playing the power games of Washington. Yeah. So he's going to have to learn these very quickly and get on top of things.
Neil, let's talk more about how we got here and the politics playing out, because McMaster is replacing the ousted National Security Advisor General Michael Flynn that we discussed so much here on this network, and it's been discussed everywhere else. We're hearing from the Vice President for the first time about Flynn's conduct. Listen to this.
I would tell you that I was disappointed to learn that the facts that have been conveyed to me by General Flynn were inaccurate. But we honor General Flynn's long service to the United States of America, and I fully support the President's decision to ask for his resignation.
I want to get your response to that, but now that the President has filled this vacancy, at least on this issue, Nia, is this a reset for the White House?
You know, I think it is, and as everyone said, McMaster in many ways couldn't be more different than Flynn. A lot of folks in the intelligence community and on the Hill, not big fans of General Flynn, and McMaster is certainly getting a different sort of reception, as we heard from the panelists here. I do think on the question of Flynn, this idea, and in fact that he lied to the Vice President, that is still lingering. We're still going to have a Senate Intelligence Committee look into that. It's still unclear as to why Flynn actually felt he had to lie to the Vice President, given the fact that the President himself had said it would be okay if he talked to Russia about sanctions. So yeah, I mean, I don't think that issue is going to go away. So it's not quite a reset in terms of dealing with the Flynn controversy. That's still very much going to be around, as there are all of these investigations into this administration's relationship to Russia, not only in the campaign phase, but as the administration in the White House now. You saw, for instance, folks on the Hill reaching out to the White House to make sure they're preserving records around all of this. But listen, this is a good day for this White House in terms of this pick. A lot of these issues still to be resolved, though, in terms of Flynn, as well as what actually happens to Bannon. Does somebody like K.T. McFarland, also who's gotten some scrutiny, does she remain on that National Security Council? A lot of people felt like she might have been in over her head in terms of that position, and in terms of some of the things she said previously that sort of raised some eyebrows. So we'll see, but it is day one in terms of McMaster.
General Marks, I want to talk to you a little bit more, because Nia is talking Russia now. The Senate Intelligence Committee asking the administration to preserve records on Russia. What's your take on all this?
Well, there's a reasonable man standard, I think, that needs to be wrapped around all of this in terms of this incoming administration and their communications with their Russian counterparts. First of all, as has been said multiple times on this air, it's really just doing your job. You're trying to set the table for how you intend to engage with friends and allies and adversaries going forward. Nobody would invoke the Logan Act as a result of what took place. But I think there's a notion of frequency, volume, and periodicity in terms of those communications. And what probably should have happened was there's a single point of entry in terms of communicating with different nations and different entities as we, the new inbound administration, get ready to take over. Here are the list of the interrogatives that we want to ask. Here are the list of the issues that we want to discuss. But nobody's negotiating a thing. All we're doing is we're essentially establishing an agenda as we move forward. That's called doing your job. Sadly, that thing got out of control, and I think it was characterized more like an Oklahoma land rush than anything else.
All right. Stick around, everyone. We come right back. President Trump's Sweden moment. What he said, what he meant to say, and why he's doubling down today.